afternoon. This is Vicinity 95.3 FM Ikejile Idesha. The time is 12 o'clock. I am Afeez Hassan with Global News. First, the headlines. Federal government exceeds borrowing limit as new debt reaches 12.62 trillion naira. Algerian parliament elects Khalida as its first female speaker. And Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu holds first meeting with US President after Iran war. Now the news in full. The federal government exceeded its 2024 borrowing target by 4.79 trillion naira after a wider than projected budget deficit forced it to raise significantly more financing than originally planned. According to the latest fourth quarter and consolidated budget implementation report for 2024, the federal government new borrowings rose to 12.62 trillion naira, exceeding the budgeted 7.83 trillion naira by 4.79 trillion naira, or 61.2%, while the higher borrowing requirement followed a substantial revenue shortfall, which pulled the fiscal deficit to 13.51 trillion naira, well above the approved deficit of 9.18 trillion naira. The report showed that aggregate federal government revenue stood at 20.98 trillion naira compared with the budget estimate of 25.88 trillion naira, representing a shortfall of 4.90 trillion naira. Total expenditure, however, amounted to 34.49 trillion naira, only 561.29 billion naira below the approved estimate of 35.06 trillion naira, indicating that the wider fiscal gap was driven primarily by weaker revenue rather than higher spending. An analysis of the government financing profile showed that domestic borrowing remained exactly on target at 6.06 trillion naira, but higher foreign borrowing and budget support significantly increased over borrowings. Together, domestic borrowing, foreign borrowing, and budget support brought total new borrowings to 12.62 trillion naira, exceeding the approved borrowing program by 4.79 trillion naira. The Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum on Tuesday endorsed the proposed establishment of state police, but insisted that governors must have full constitutional powers to appoint and remove state commissioners of police, just as the president exercises authority over the inspector general of police. The forum, comprising prominent socio-cultural organizations including Afenifere, Ohaneze Ndigbo, the Pan Nigeria Delta Forum, and the Middle Belt Forum, said anything short of such autonomy would amount to creating a federal state police rather than a genuinely decentralized policing system rooted in true federalism. The position formed part of resolutions reached at a general meeting of stakeholders and elder statesmen held at PANDEF's liaison office in Abuja, and was attended by former Akwa Ibom State Governor Victor Atta, former Enugu State Governor Okwezere Nwodo, National Chairman of PANDEF Dr. Godknows Igali, President of the Middle Belt Forum Dr. Bitrus Pogu, and other leaders from the Southern and Middle Belt East. Commenting on the 2027 general elections, the regional leaders reaffirmed their earlier position that the president should remain in the South after President Bola Tinubu's first term, arguing that such an arrangement was necessary for national cohesion and political stability, while also expressed concern over what it described as the erosion of international democracy across political parties, condemning the alleged dominance of party structures by a few individuals during ongoing primary elections. Away from Nigeria, Algerian parliament has elected its first ever human speaker on Tuesday evening, making Khalida Bufedeche the fourth highest ranking official in the country. Bufedeche, an allergist by training, who represents the capital Algiers, is a member of the National Liberation Front, FLN, the historic party of Algerian independence and allied with the current government. The FLN was the biggest winner in parliamentary elections earlier this month, securing 91 of the body's 407 seats, while the vote was marked by the lowest turnout ever at 21%. She assumed the speakership of a body where women are significantly underrepresented, holding just 25 seats, or 6% of the total. However, the previous parliament had 38 women members, and the one before that had 118 following 2017 elections, which were held under a quota system. Gabon and Equatorial Guinea signed an agreement on Tuesday ending a decades-long dispute over three tiny islands in potentially oil-rich waters after the top UN court backed Malabo. The two West African nations have been squabbling over the 30-hectare island of Mbani and two smaller low-lying islands, Cocotiers and Conga, since the early 1970s. In May last year, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, which rules in disputes between states, found in favor of Equatorial Guinea. At a ceremony at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Equatorial Guinea Foreign Minister Simon Oyono Esono Ang and Gabon's head of the Constitutional Council, Diaidon Abaha Uwono, signed a accord committing both countries to respect the ICJ's decision, saying the matter has been settled once and for all, and the two countries must now move forward. AU Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, who also signed the agreement, welcomed the resolution of a border dispute that he said had gone on for too long. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the White House on Tuesday for his first talks physically with President Donald Trump since the Iran war began, as the U.S. military reported it had intercepted multiple missiles launched by Tehran. The closed-door talks, which the White House described as positive and productive, lasted for about an hour and a half, came as Netanyahu and Trump sought to patch over public disagreement on the war. Netanyahu said in a video message after the meeting that it was one of the best conversations he has ever had with the President of the United States, and that it touched on common goal, ensuring that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons. Both sides had held their fire over the weekend, following nearly 2 weeks of nightly strikes by the United States on Iran and repeated missiles with drone salvos by Tehran targeting Washington's allies around the Gulf. Relations between Trump and Netanyahu reached a low point in April during negotiations on the ceasefire with Iran, with Trump unleashing profanity-laced tirades against the Israeli premier. Iran has rejected a proposal from Oman for the joint oversight of the Strait of Hormuz after Iran made a proposal of its own, as both sides continue to pore over the terms of what the final agreement could look like. However, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Garibabadi said in a state broadcast that Oman's proposal had not sufficiently addressed Tehran's concerns about control of the Strait of Hormuz, saying counter-proposal would give Tehran more control over the waterway. The narrow strait has been at the center of the conflict between the United States and Iran since late February, when U.S.-Israeli attacks began. Before the war, about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas exports were shipped from Gulf producers, while Iran closed the strait shortly after the war began, triggering global supply challenges. A bit of sport. Two Argentine players hired private security firms to guard their homes in the UK after Argentina's victory over England during the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It was gathered that the two players are Manchester United defender Lisandro Martinez and Liverpool midfielder Alexis Mac Allister. while securing personnel patrolling their houses for 2 days, with emotions high after Argentina's dramatic World Cup win against England. Recall that Argentina came from a goal down to beat England 2-1 in the World Cup semi-final encounter at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And the 2 goals from Enzo Fernandez and Lautaro Martinez gave Argentina the victory after Anthony Gordon had put the 3 Lions ahead. To end global news, a recap of the major headlines. Federal government has exceeded borrowing limit as new debt reaches 12.62 trillion naira. We told you that Algerian parliament elected Khalida as its first female speaker, making her the 4th ranking official in the country. Lastly, you heard Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held first meeting with US President Donald Trump since the beginning of the Iran war.